They called it a tragic accident, a faulty prop gun, a freak misfire. But for millions watching the story unfold in 1993, it felt like something darker, like a cruel twist of fate. Brandon Lee, the only son of martial arts legend Bruce Lee, was just 28 years old. He had finally stepped out of his father's enormous shadow and was days away from finishing what was meant to be his breakout role, Eric Draven in The Crow, a gothic avenger reborn from the grave. And then, in a scene that eerily mirrored his character's death, Brandon was shot on set. The bullet was real. The cameras were rolling. And the curse of the Lee family whispered through Hollywood once again. This wasn't just a young actor lost too soon. This was a legacy haunted by conspiracy, cinematic mysticism, and a chilling pattern no one could ignore. How could both father and son, rising stars destined for greatness, die suddenly, mysteriously, and surrounded by the glare of film lights? Today, we dig into the story behind the tragedy. From Brandon's struggle with identity and fame, to the eerie coincidences that link his death to Bruce Lee's own untimely demise. This is not just a tale of Hollywood heartbreak. It's a story of destiny, obsession, and the shadow that fame can cast even across generations. Brandon Bruce Lee was born on the 1st of February, 1965, in Oakland, California, into a name already etched in legend. His father, Bruce Lee, had just begun reshaping martial arts and Asian representation in Western cinema. But Brandon didn't grow up basking in fame. He grew up in its aftermath. When Bruce Lee died suddenly in 1973, Brandon was just 8 years old. The world mourned a hero. Brandon mourned a father. His mother, Linda Lee Cadwell, moved him and his sister to Seattle, then Los Angeles, hoping to give them a life beyond the shadow of tragedy. But for Brandon, Bruce Lee wasn't just a father, he was an icon, a ghost, and a pressure that never left. In school, Brandon often struggled with identity, discipline, and direction. He was half Chinese in a world that rarely embraced mixed-race heritage, and the comparisons were relentless. Everyone wanted to know if he would follow in his father's footsteps. In his late teens, Brandon decided he would, but on his own terms. He trained in martial arts, yes, but also in theater. He attended Emerson College, then studied acting at the Lee Strasberg Theater Institute, where he was determined to be taken seriously as a dramatic actor, not just a martial artist. His first major break came in 1986 with the television movie Kung Fu, the movie, ironically tied to a concept his father had once created. Brandon was compelling, magnetic, and clearly talented, but still seen as Bruce Lee's son. Hollywood didn't quite know what to do with him. He wasn't a cookie-cutter action star. He wasn't just a fighter. He was more introspective, more layered. Brandon's early career was a tug-of-war between his legacy and his individuality. And as the roles started to come, Legacy of Rage, Showdown in Little Tokyo, Rapid Fire, so did the realization. He was getting better. He was ready for something more. And that something would soon be The Crow. By the early 1992, Brandon Lee was no longer just Bruce Lee's son. He was becoming a compelling force of his own. His performances in Rapid Fire and Showdown in Little Tokyo showed Hollywood he had the charisma, the talent, and the physical intensity to carry a film. But Brandon wanted more than action flicks and flying kicks. He wanted depth. Then came The Crow, a dark, atmospheric adaptation of James O'Barr's graphic novel. The role of Eric Draven was like nothing Brandon had done before, a musician brutally murdered, who returns from the dead to avenge the love of his life. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional, tragic, poetic. Brandon poured himself into the role. He trained hard, transformed physically, and embraced the pain and loss at the heart of the character. On set, he was described as intensely focused but kind, often cracking jokes between takes. He was respected not just for his performance, but for his humility. Crew members would later recall how Brandon never acted like a star. He acted like a man with something to prove. And prove it, he did. Early footage stunned producers. His screen presence was haunting. The camera loved him. Industry insiders began to whisper, this was his moment. This was the film that would launch him into A-list status, not as a martial arts heir, but as a serious actor in his own right. Brandon had also found happiness in his personal life. He was engaged to Eliza Hutton, and the two were planning their wedding after the film wrapped. For once, everything seemed to align: career, love, legacy, future. But fate was writing a different script, one that wouldn't end with applause but with silence. The 31st of March, 1993. It was supposed to be just another night of filming. Brandon Lee had almost wrapped principal photography on The Crow. The finish line was in sight. He was just days away from heading home to finalize wedding plans, to begin a new life. The scene that night was straightforward. His character, Eric Draven, walks into his apartment and is shot by a thug. A blank-firing revolver was used, a common tool on set. But something had gone horribly, fatally wrong. When the gun was fired, Brandon collapsed. Everyone thought he was acting. But when he didn't get up, panic spread. He was rushed to New Hanover Regional Medical Center. Emergency surgery lasted hours. But it was too late. Brandon Lee was declared dead at 1:03 a.m., age 28. The investigation that followed uncovered a chilling truth. A fragment from a dummy round lodged in the barrel from a previous scene had been accidentally fired by the blank round used that night. In essence, the gun became a real weapon. It was a tragic chain of oversights: improper props, lack of safety checks, rushed production schedules. But for the public, it was more than an accident. It felt like a curse. Because 20 years earlier, Brandon's father, Bruce Lee, had also died young, unexpectedly, and under mysterious circumstances. Conspiracy theories swirled. Some believed in a Lee family curse. Others pointed fingers at Hollywood's carelessness. Was it bad luck, negligence, or something darker? The most chilling part? The scene Brandon died filming was nearly identical to one already written in the script, his character dying from a gunshot on the eve of transformation. It was art imitating life, until life imitated death. Even more tragic, Brandon and Eliza's wedding invitations had just been mailed. His mother, Linda, had now lost not just a husband, but a son, both in their prime, both stolen by the cruel twist of fate. The set of The Crow shut down. The cast and crew were devastated. But the question lingered: should the film be finished or buried with Brandon? Officially, Brandon Lee's death was ruled an accident, a tragic convergence of negligence, bad protocol, and mismanaged props. But the public wasn't satisfied. Questions emerged. How could something so basic, gun safety on a film set, go so catastrophically wrong? Why was a live fragment left in the barrel? Why wasn't the gun double-checked? Why wasn't a firearms expert overseeing that scene? And then came the darker theories, whispers that Brandon had been targeted. That history had repeated itself far too closely. Because his father, Bruce Lee, had also died under vague circumstances, suddenly collapsing at age 32, with conflicting medical explanations ranging from cerebral edema to allergic reactions. Some speculated foul play. Others believed he was silenced by criminal organizations or jealous competitors. To this day, no single cause of death has ever been universally accepted. So when Brandon died so young, on the cusp of stardom, during a scene that echoed his character's scripted death, it felt like déjà vu. Many pointed to the so-called Lee family curse. 2 generations of gifted martial artists, both taken before reaching their full potential, both surrounded by mystery. Then came the eerie footage. Though the fatal scene had not been officially recorded, or at least was said to have been destroyed, rumors persisted that copies existed, locked in vaults, never to be seen again. Conspiracy theorists claimed someone didn't want the world to know what really happened. Meanwhile, the studio behind The Crow, Miramax, was in turmoil. Financial pressures clashed with moral dilemma. Should they finish the film, using body doubles and early footage, or shelve it forever out of respect? Eventually, with the blessing of Brandon's fiancée and mother, the film was completed using clever editing, digital effects, and stand-ins. But for those who watched it, The Crow would never feel like just a movie. It was a requiem, a haunting elegy for a life and a legacy cut short. A film where every scene now felt like a goodbye. The truth of what happened to Brandon Lee may forever be entangled in shadows. What's certain is this: Hollywood failed him. and the world lost a star that had just begun to rise. When The Crow was released in 1994, it was an instant cult phenomenon. Audiences were captivated by Brandon Lee's performance, raw, haunting, and heartbreakingly real. Every line, every expression, now carried a tragic weight. It wasn't just acting, it was Brandon's final gift. Critics praised the film for its style, tone, and emotional depth, but above all, they praised Brandon. He was the soul of the story, and even in death, he had transcended the label of Bruce Lee's son. He was, at last, his own legend. Fans around the world mourned, but they also celebrated. They saw in The Crow something rare, a character, and an actor merging into something timeless. Brandon became a symbol of beauty born from pain, a phoenix who rose once on screen before vanishing forever. In the years since, his legacy has only grown. Actors, directors, and martial artists continue to cite him as an influence. Cosplayers don his iconic black and white makeup every Halloween, and new generations discover The Crow without even knowing at first that the man they're watching actually died making it. His mother, Linda, created the Brandon Lee Foundation, supporting arts education for young people. His fiancée, Eliza Hutton, stepped away from the spotlight but continued to quietly honor his memory. Today, Brandon Lee stands as more than a cautionary tale. He represents unfulfilled potential, yes, but also authenticity, courage, and creative purity. He was never chasing superstardom, he just wanted to tell stories that mattered. And with The Crow, he told one final, unforgettable story, one that would echo far beyond the screen. In the final scene of The Crow, Eric Draven walks into the night, reunited with his lost love in the afterlife. The screen fades to black. A simple message appears, for Brandon and Eliza. It's not just a dedication. It's a reminder of what was lost and what still lingers. Brandon Lee wasn't just the son of a legend. He was a dreamer, a fighter, and an artist who carved out his own identity in a world that kept trying to define him. He gave everything to his final role, his talent, his spirit, his life. And though his time was brief, his presence still burns bright. Every time someone watches The Crow, every time a young actor dares to break free from expectation, Brandon's legacy lives on. In a world obsessed with fame, Brandon Lee reminds us that true greatness isn't measured by longevity but by impact. And some stories, no matter how tragic, deserve to be told again and again. If this story moved you, share it. Let others know the name Brandon Lee, not just as a shadow of Bruce Lee, but as a star in his own right. Subscribe to Faded Crowns for more untold legacies, hidden truths, and the stories that fame tried to bury. Because sometimes, the brightest lights burn the fastest.